Another edition of Riding Home, this time a very critical question. And I'll start with Matt DeBerry because Ryan's a little bit young for this. Why do people hate Mike Bobo? Let's just go there. Let's start with it. Go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead.
it's a question that I don't really understand myself. Second best offensive coordinator, I think, in program history. I think we'll touch on that at some point sooner than later. But the play at South Carolina stands out, Dean. You know what I'm talking about. You wrote about that on Dog Post earlier this year. Even with a guy like Hudson Mason at quarterback who didn't, have the same type of arm talent that Matthew did and Aaron did, they still scored points at will. And a lot of that was mainly due to the rushing attack that year. But he did a lot with what he had, and I don't think people are really understanding that until now. But they had some really, really explosive offenses, and again, like we've talked about multiple times, the offensive line has been the biggest change from that era to this one. And to see the talent that he has capable to him right now. I mean, he knows these guys. It's not like he's just walking in the door. These are a whole bunch of new players. He's been around the program a little bit. He knows what he has. I think it's going to be very successful, but there's still a lot of people who, for some reason, can't get over, some of the calls maybe around the goal line that he used to do. But the hate is unfortunately still out there for Mike Bobo. I don't necessarily understand it, though.
Okay, Ryan, you get a crack at this one now.
Well, I mean, I was alive for this stuff, man. So
You were alive
I
for
remember,
2007?
yeah, I was 6. But I mean, I remember the Aaron Murray teams put up a lot of points.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy when you have backs like Todd Gurley and Isaiah Crowell to score during that era. You had Matthew, you had AJ Green. I mean, those teams, like, let's just be quite frank, weren't as stacked as these last couple of Georgia teams, right? Like Todd
No.
Monken, without a doubt, the best offensive coordinator in Georgia history and one of the best offensive minds in the sport right now, just in general. But I mean, the talent that he had is definitely better, like on paper. Like these last two teams would wipe the floor with the Mike Bobo teams, and that's not really Mike Bobo's fault. There's definitely a talent gap. I think that some the comments I've seen just on social media about Mike Bobo have cracked me up, but those teams weren't bad. I mean, by any means, and those offenses scored. So I do think the hate's a little much, but I understand people's disappointment when you saw what you saw the last couple of years. I think part of it is probably Monken leaving too, and it's just displaced kind of disappointment.
Angst.
Yeah.
I mean, you've gone 29-1 over the last 2 years. Will you go 29-1 over the next two? Probably not, but you could go 27-3 and win a national championship. So, I think to me, I can get into the South Carolina play because I just watched it again this morning. Um, you know, the difference, as I wrote about, make sure, by the way, the way not to miss out on these things is by signing up for our newsletter, which is down below. Be sure that you're signing up for that and you'll get these in your inbox every morning. It's well read, whether it's coming from any of us that's writing at the time. But um, Mike had spectacular superstars. I don't know that the superstars of today at Georgia are better than the superstars back then. That's probably a discussion for another time. There's no running back in Georgia history that's better than Todd Gurley. I love Herschel Walker. I think he's a great.
That's a great take. That's a great take,
Well, it's
dude.
not a
He's been on that take a
it's not a new
while.
one. It's
Yeah,
not a new one
yeah.
from me. Todd Gurley in a singular game is the best running back Georgia's ever had. Herschel Walker is the second best, and probably Nick is the third best. But we can have this discussion some other time. You know, Mike's superstars were Matthew Stafford, AJ Green, Todd Gurley, uh, you know, Malcolm Mitchell, if you want to say a superstar, I don't know. But who was their best offensive lineman, Matt?
Uh, John
Pro-
Theus,
I would say it was either Clint Bowling or David
Clint
Andrews.
Bowling. Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
yeah. Ben Jones was
Ben
fantastic
Jones as well.
as
Ben Jones
well.
was really good. I skipped out on Aaron Murray as a superstar. I mean, the leading
Yeah.
passer in SEC history still. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was immediately started thinking of the 5-star offensive lineman that he had, and John Theus was really the only one that came to mind. And I think that's going to be a big difference. But Mike knows what he's doing. He's been around a long time, and I'm sure he's learned a little bit from Todd Monken too. He's not going to rewrite the playbook and anything like that. He's got and a quarterback who's been in the system for a few years now. Keep it simple, keep it easy, get the ball to Brock Bowers. I know, he hasn't had a guy like that, at tight end. So I think he's got to be really excited about this. And when the quarterback goes, that's when people love Mike Bobo. When the quarterback play starts to, not be great, that's when people, just tend to jump on Mike Bobo about it. But he's going to have some talented quarterbacks come through, and I think this is a big deal for Gunnar Stockton as well.
Oh, I agree about that. Ryan, Todd Monken had some shitty games. He didn't have a lot of them. One of them, which you and I were at, was the Missouri game. I mean, Georgia's defense bailed the team out that day. Mike Bobo didn't have a defense back in the day, and there was one season in his 8 years as offensive coordinator where Georgia held teams to under 20 yards, 20 points a game for a season. One season of 8. Kirby's, I think, maybe had one over 20. This is a vastly different situation, completely. I'd say.
Yeah, and the offensive line, that portion too, like Matt brought up, it's not in the same universe how much better like they are in the trenches on both sides of the football. Now, much more talented team. I expect Bobo to do better with what he has now than what he had back then, just because maybe at the top the stars are not as good. I think you have to throw people like Brock Bowers up there with guys like Todd Gurley as best offensive players, but so they're not without stars. I mean, and the track speed of guys like Arian Smith, like they have different talents to use. Right. I think having a staff that has so many roots here totally matters for the culture, because now you got the head coach played football and they all played together, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
you got the
generally
head coach,
speaking, yeah,
the OC, and one of the co-DCs all played football at Georgia. I mean, that's
and the wide receivers coach and
tight ends
a lot
coach.
of these guys.
I mean, that's huge for recruiting.
Yeah, I'd like to see some wrinkles come back, like the toss sweep a little bit. Give us some old school, Mike Bobo, run the football as well. It'd be nice to bring some of that stuff back.
So why did they run the toss sweep? Okay, here's why I don't think you'll see a lot of the toss sweep. They ran the toss sweep, Matt, because they had athletic 300-ish pounds, 300-pound-ish linemen. They didn't have, Amarius Mims, Ratledge, McClendon. They didn't have kind of big burly men. They had athletes, Kublano, Theus, certainly David Andrews, but
Canarius Gates sat him.
Canarius Gates was a great value. I remember going to see Canarius Gates the night before signing day. They just you look at this. It made me think about how great Canarius was for what he was, but they were just getting killed in recruiting. I mean, they were getting killed in recruiting, and that's all there is to it. I do want to go back to the South Carolina game just for a second. I don't know why we're talking about this game
still,
because the offense at Georgia scored 35 points. They put up 35 points on the road in the SEC. Maybe Jeremy Pruitt's defense could do a better job. But the problem was
100%.
Problem was, man. I mean, he got completely owned whenever he played in a big game, Pruitt, and he just wasn't a great defensive coordinator. Period. So I mean, of course, he looked good at Alabama. We're by the same principle we're using with Mike at Georgia. But on that particular play, where Pruitt's defense actually did make a play, Damian Swan, they get the ball at the 4-yard line. Quavon Hicks is not wide open. He's what we used to call at Coker piss wide open. He could take a piss and still be wide open. And Hudson Mason freaks out and throws the ball basically to the ground, and it's behind the line of scrimmage. It's intentional grounding. Yeah. Now it sounds like I'm like coming after Hudson. I don't care. It's what happened. But Quavon Hicks is wide open for a walk-in touchdown because Chris Conley has smacked his defender legally within the period of where the ball was. You couldn't get offensive pass interference called. It was the perfect play call. The quarterback didn't execute, and it's that simple. Right. And people say, "Why didn't you give it to Todd Gurley?" They gave it to Todd Gurley the next 2 plays. So, there's stuff that Mike has done that's not been good, but he's an offensive coordinator. They make mistakes. Quarterbacks throw interceptions. It happens. But I think, to me, the problem with Mike is he's been a quarterback or in some way at Georgia essentially since 1993. I remember him coming in the 94 game against Tech and playing pretty well, actually, when Eric Zaire got hurt. And from that moment forward, Mike has been a divisive person. If people want to hate, he is the lightning rod. I'm not saying it's right, but it's what it is. And, he's going to have to perform. That's all there is to it. Ryan, take us to the break.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, they promote within. They didn't have to do some big search. It's their friends. I think that as far as staff chemistry, this affects nothing. I mean, it doesn't affect anything. He sat behind, as an offensive analyst, if people are really worried that Monken's style of offense is gone, well, they just sat behind and worked together for a year. So it's not going to just disappear. They're not just going to completely go away with it. What you're going to see is a change in the offensive play calling because there's a change in the quarterback. It's not going to be the exact same thing. They're not going to run all those crazy rollouts and let Carson run around the way that Stetson did. So you're going to see a difference, and then it's not going to be 100% because it's Mike Bobo. The personnel is different, and that matters a lot.
Hey, very quickly, Matt, in Mike's last year at Georgia, 41 points a game, and Todd Monken's last year at Georgia, 41 points a game.
Easy transition. That it's the safest, easiest, promotion. And I think a lot of people saw it coming for a reason. I think it's going to work out.
We'll see. Hey, we'll see.